Why have we come to earth? Do you remember? Why have we taken birth? Do you remember?
There I am. Good morning. It's been said that the world is divided up into two kinds of people. Those who were here last night to hear the Swami and those who weren't. I fortunately was among the first category and was blessed to hear the wonderful comic genius that is the Swami Beyondananda. I was reminded this morning as I was thinking of how I wanted to introduce him, however, of when I was a kid growing up, watching Mickey Mouse and Goofy and all that, and loving the comic and the show of that, but then later getting to understand Walt Disney, the creator behind all that, the mind, the genius behind all of that. And so I think that today we get to do the same thing. We get to take the curtain back from the Swami and see the man who creates the Swami and experience his genius. So I want to invite you to please join me in a warm welcome for Mr. Steve Bhaerman.
Thank you, thank you. Well, you heard the Swami last night, or maybe you did. If you take my time travel workshop, if you missed it, you can go back and hear it tomorrow. My time travel workshop, by the way, was last week, so. It was really wonderful to be here last night because this is a very vital community. I could feel it in the laughter. I could feel it in the energy. There's energy and laughter. There's love and laughter. And the little play shop I'll be doing later is called Wake Up Laughing because there's a relationship between laughter and awakening, as we'll find out. Today I'm going to talk to you about the 4 healing qualities of humor. One of the things I've been very fortunate because I've been immersed in comedy all my life, really. I've been very, very lucky in that I've learned how to see funny and hear funny. And so I often will tune into the sense of humor of the universe. And hopefully, I think everybody could learn to do that as we immerse ourselves. So here's an example. About a dozen years ago, Trudy, my wife Trudy, was in Michigan, and she was dismantling her parents' big, big home. And as you know, in the Midwest, there's basements and there's attics. And what that means is there's a lot of room for stuff. And her parents were collectors of stuff. And I think they imagined that someday there'd be this huge garage sale. And you look at some of these items and you realize they had to be manufactured specifically for a garage sale. It's a factory in New Jersey that makes stuff for garage sales. And so Trudy knows that the thing that I've loved ever since I was a kid is baseball. I love baseball. And so throughout all of these tons and tons and tons of things, she's looking for some kind of baseball memorabilia to bring back for me. And the only thing she could find that her parents had collected over all of these years was a Kellogg's Corn Flake Yogi Berra baseball card. It was a holographic card. So when you held it this way, you saw Yogi Berra's face. When you held it that way, you saw him batting. And so I took this card and I just started doing this. I said, Trudy, you know, over the years, there's probably been tens of thousands of different baseball cards. Out of all of those cards, you bring me a shape-shifting yogi. That's the natural sense of humor of the universe. For years and years, I've looked at humor as a healing tool, and there's a story, a true story, that to me typifies what that power of humor is. It's something that happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, which is the closest we've come so far to blowing ourselves up. It was a very, very tense time. And as this was happening, it so happened that there were a group of American and Soviet delegates who had been meeting to discuss possible trade between the countries. And so when the news of the missile crisis hit, everything stopped. And there was tremendous tension in the room. Finally, one of the Soviet delegates very timidly raised his hand. He said, I suggest we each go around and tell a joke, and he volunteered to start. His joke was What's the difference between capitalism and communism? In capitalism, man exploits man. In communism, it's the other way around. And everybody laughed, and the whole room just kind of, a sigh of relief as the tension was released. And what happened was they were able to see and experience each other beyond the isms that kept them separate. So I've always held that as a healing quality of humor. So perhaps the first and most important healing quality of humor, it reminds us that we're bigger than our problem or situation. Years ago, before embarking on this, I love the word embarking. You know, it's a funny word. Before embarking up the right tree and doing this, I'm a dog in Chinese astrology, okay? But in dyslexic Chinese astrology, I'm a god. Anyway, before doing this, I was a freelance writer living in Michigan, and I decided I was going to do comedy as a full-time career, and I made this vow, and it was such a powerful vow that all of my writing jobs dried up instantly. And I went through what I call my Baroque period. I was no money. I was so Baroque, I was hiding from the landlord. And during this period of time, we were 2 months behind in our rent. It was very stressful. And at that time, Trudy and I, as a spiritual practice, every morning, we're reading from A Course in Miracles. And one morning, the lesson was, you're not upset for the reason you think. And boy, that one really ticked me off. I knew I was upset. We had no money, couldn't pay our rent, And just as we get done reading this, the telephone rings, and Trudy answers the phone. She says, Steve, it's the landlord. What should I tell him? I said, how about you're not upset for the reason you think? Going, wow, this spiritual stuff really works, And we laughed, and in the laughter came release and perspective, and we got through that. It was not a problem. A number of years ago, one of my favorite uncles was having physical problems. He wasn't doing very well. He was in the hospital, and he was depressed, and they weren't telling him anything. And so being many miles away, I called him on the phone. I had no idea what I was going to say. But when you invoke the spirit of humor, farce fields show up and jokes magically appear. So as soon as he answered the phone, I remembered a story. It was a story about a man who needed very, very serious operation. He went to the finest surgeon in the country, operation successful. Surgeon presents him with the bill. He says, I'm sorry, I can't afford to pay that. And the surgeon says, how about your health insurance? And the guy just laughed. Look, pay me whatever you can. And the guy said, you know what? I have no money whatsoever. I can't pay you anything. Well, now the surgeon is very upset. He says, if you knew you couldn't pay, why did you come to the finest surgeon in the country? And the guy says, because when it comes to my health, money is no object. And of course, my uncle laughed because this was a joke about the very medical system that he was dealing with. Then he told me a joke because he had a great sense of humor. I still remember the joke 20-something years later. It's about this world-famous minister who dies and goes to heaven. And he arrives at the pearly gates at about the same time as a cab driver from New York. I let the cab driver in, and this minister is waiting and waiting. Finally, he calls the attending angel over. He says, excuse me, I'm a world-famous minister. Why'd you let the cab driver in and I'm waiting out here? The angel says, well, because when you preached, everybody slept. But when he drove, everybody prayed. And my uncle and I went back and forth for 20 minutes telling jokes, and by the end of that period of time, he was vital. You could tell it in his voice. Because it reminded him that he, who he really is, was bigger than any condition and situation. And even in the most dire of circumstances, and maybe especially, humor is an amazing spiritual tool to have. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl talks about being in a Nazi death camp during World War II. He and a fellow inmate made a pact that every day they would find something to laugh about, because if you're able to laugh in a situation like that, there's a part of you that they can't capture. It's like that wonderful Far Side cartoon, which you've probably all seen, It's kind of a hell scene with fire and brimstone, and there's a guy with a wheelbarrow full of ashes whistling a happy tune, and one of the devils is saying, you know, I don't think we're getting through to that guy. So in a dire situation, if you're able to laugh, it's spiritual power. And to give you an idea of the kind of leverage, or as the Swami would call it, leverage, you can have through humor, one of the jokes that actually circulated among the inmates in the camps was about these two Jewish guys who decide they are going to assassinate Hitler. They know Hitler's motorcade is going to pass this intersection at 11 in the morning. They're waiting for him. 11 in the morning, he's not there. 11:15, 11:30. When he's not there by 11:45, one of the assassins turns to the other and says, gee, I hope nothing's happened to him. That's the power of humor. So humor reminds us that we're bigger than our situation, provides a God's eye view. Second quality of humor is that defenseless humor creates defenselessness. Now, I grew up in New York. I spent my deformative years there. You know, I was the class comedian. Anybody here, how many people, be truthful, who was a class comedian? Okay. Now, you know this is your archetype. This is a sign from God. It's the first time you're in a lunchroom and you make another kid laugh so hard that milk comes out of their nose. That's a sign from God. So that was me. After I was done with my joke and everybody finished laughing, the teacher would give me a 0. So finally, you know, like everybody else, I was told to get serious, and I really, really tried. I really, really tried to get serious. And I'm at college. I'm trying to blend in, trying not to make waves, you know. And I'm in a sociology class with 250 other very, very bored individuals. And I'm in this class, and I'm in this space somewhere between sleep and deep sleep. And the teacher is speaking about social mores, and she says, and who can define for us social mores? And without even thinking, I'm standing up, and it was kind of a comedic Tourette's. What comes out of me is, when the moon hits your eye like a big pizza, buy out some more. Even little, you know, all that. And everybody burst out laughing but the professor, who gave me a D. But I earned that D. So I was that kind of kid. But the other thing, as I mentioned earlier, I loved baseball. And one of my favorite baseball characters in New York when I was a kid was Casey Stengel. He was the manager of the Yankees and then the Mets. And he was a beloved figure in New York as an old man. But when he was a rookie, many, 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 many years before, the fans of New York hated him. And every time he would step to the plate or walk onto the field, he would get booed. And this went on for a while, and one day, Casey Stengel stepped to the plate to bat. Fans booed him. He tipped his cap. A little sparrow flew out from under his cap. And everybody in the ballpark stood up and cheered, and they never booed him again. I want you to think about this. One playful gesture changing the energy of 20,000 New Yorkers. So, of course, the moral of the story is, if you're going to flip somebody the bird, make it a real bird. Again, defenselessness. He made a joke. He did something that was so playful that nobody could dislike him. One of the great things I love about what I do is I get to go to a lot of very interesting events. And a number of years ago, I went to an event in Florida Keys. I was invited to speak as a keynote speaker. Being in the Keys, a keynote, that would make sense. And it was, believe it or not, the Holistic Lawyers Conference. Law as a healing profession. That's why, it's 250 holistic lawyers. It was really cool. And so I did my talk on humor and defenselessness and so on, and one of the attorneys came up to me afterward and told me a story. And he said that he was once involved in a very, very contentious negotiation with another attorney. And the attorney made this counter offer that was an insult. And this guy was furious. He was so mad that the only thing that could come out of his mouth was, "Nyah, nyah, nyah." Well, the other lawyer went, "Oh, wise guy, eh?" And the two of them did Three Stooges shtick back and forth until they both burst out laughing. And they worked the whole thing out. So the Three Stooges did a healing. I was once involved in a really difficult negotiation by phone, and it was one of these situations, I'm sure you've had this, where every word you say digs the hole deeper. Finally, I hung up the phone. I was totally disgusted. Then I remembered something from when I was a kid in New York. We had a phenomenon on the playground called the do-over. Do-over. So I called this person back. I said, "Hi, this is Steve Bhaerman. Did somebody just call you pretending to be me?" And she laughed, and we worked the whole thing out. So it was really a very powerful thing to be able to just kind of be blameless. Now, sometimes you can change the energy, similar to what happened with the U.S. and Soviet delegates. I was once the MC at an outdoor music event, and one of the performers was a very, very talented harp player, but like her instrument, she was tightly wired. And there had to be a change in the program because some other guy needed to perform so he can go to another gig. And instead of agreeing agreeably to this change, she did what the Swami would call tantrum yoga. And she got very upset, and unfortunately the audience could see her, and they decided that they didn't like her. So it's almost time for her to go on, and I do channeling. So I asked her, would it be okay if I channeled Ed Sullivan to introduce her? So clearly she wasn't paying attention, so she said, okay. Now, of course, for those who remember Ed Sullivan, bringing him into your body is very painful. You need chiropractic care afterward. But right now on our show, for you music lovers, please welcome. I brought her on, and she got very unenthusiastic applause because they didn't like her. She gets on stage, and I swear to you, she proceeded to tune up for 10 minutes. And now the last compassionate soul hates her, right? Finally, she's ready to play. She takes that breath, and just as her fingers touch the harp to play the first note, Ed Sullivan says, "Wasn't she wonderful, folks? Let's hear it for her, come on." Bad dog. But of course, the whole place came down, and just all of the tension, because it takes energy to hold dislike for somebody. And all of that went, like a big sigh, and there was this big, open, empty space for her to play and for them to receive her music, and at the end, they loved her. Now, Ed Sullivan did a healing through me. I had nothing to do with it. Sometimes, though, the universe will do an intervention. This happened back when I was a long-haired hippie. Now I'm longing for hair. But from time to time, Trudy will say, "I'm going to let my hair down today." And I'll go, my hair lets me down every day. But anyway, back when I was a long-haired hippie, a friend and I were traveling across country. We stopped in Denver. We wanted to stop at a place to eat, and they wouldn't serve us because of the way we looked. We're sitting there, and finally the waitress came over. She said, "Well, I'm happy to serve you, but the manager refuses." And we left. It was kind of close to closing time, and we were angry. We were angry. And we decided that we were going to throw a brick through their window. There was a construction site across I'm telling you, we were furious. And we figured, well, we got a half hour till closing time. What are we going to do? So we went to a gas station to get gas. Gas station attendant takes one look at us, and he says, "Get out of here. We don't serve no Homo sapiens here." And I'm thinking, clearly you don't. And my friend and I looked at each other. We burst out laughing, and that was the end of our plan to throw a brick through the window. So the universe, through love, intervened to create a state of defenselessness through humor where we were, come on. The other aspect of humor, the third aspect of humor, is it helps us deal with the shadow aspects of life. The things that are challenging, it gives us a different perspective. In the play shop today, we're going to talk about the alchemy of humor and the architecture of a joke, where jokes get their energy from, because laughter takes energy. Where does that energy come from? We'll find out. But anyway, here's a story that I think sums things up these days. There was a Swami, a rabbi, and a hedge fund manager. Right? It happens all the time. Traveling through the Midwest, they needed to stop for the night. They stop at a farmhouse, and the farmer says, "I'm sorry, I only have 2 beds. One of you is going to have to sleep out in the barn." Swami says, "Well, I am a humble man of God." Off he goes to sleep out in the barn. 5 minutes later, there's a knock on the door. The Swami. He says, "Well, there's a cow. Cows are sacred. I cannot sleep near a sacred cow." Rabbi says, "I have no problem with cows." Off he goes to sleep in the barn. But 5 minutes later, knock on the door. It's the rabbi. He says, "There's a pig. Pigs are not kosher. I cannot sleep near a not kosher pig." At this point, the hedge fund manager says, "You know what? I have no issue with animals. We need to get some rest." Off he goes to the barn to sleep. 5 minutes later, knock on the door. It's the pig and the cow. See, and you're laughing because it's not funny. This is the evolution of civilization. That used to be a lawyer joke, but now it's a hedge fund manager joke. One of my favorite shadow stories is something that happened in a little town in Texas in the turn of the last century. The local madam comes to the minister and she says, "Reverend, I want to make amends for my life. I want to donate everything I have to the church." He says, "Well, ma'am, I need to think about this. Come back tomorrow." And she came back the next day. He says, "I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't accept your offer." And she left, and one of the townspeople says, "Reverend, we need a new building. Why did you turn down her generous offer?" And the minister said, "Because her money is tainted money." And the guy said, "What do you mean her money? It's our money." That's the kind of thing, I love to do that Sunday morning church services, you know. The other aspect of the shadow are the parts of our lives that have been challenging. You know, I grew up in a really wonderful, loving family. I did have a Jewish mother. And the archetypal Jewish mother is a great cook who worries about everything. My mom was one for two. She worried about everything, except her cooking. You know, she wasn't naturally gifted at that, and sometimes when we're not naturally gifted, we tend to overdo. She overcooked everything. And I think in that generation, there was a belief that there was something that was very dangerous about vegetables. And whatever that was had to be killed. That vegetable's not dead yet. You know, so all of her green vegetables came out khaki, right? First time I saw a green vegetable, I said, "That can't be right. It must be artificially colored," you know. But my mom worried about everything. And one year, I took a job doing tree work, taking down trees that had Dutch elm disease. And my mother got very quiet. I knew something was wrong. "What's the matter?" I'm not making this up. My mother was afraid I would catch Dutch elm disease. That's how nature-oriented we were in Brooklyn, you know. I said, "Mom, you know, people don't get Dutch elm disease. Dogs get it." She goes, "Dogs get it." She was worried about Buster. She said, "What happens to dogs?" I said, "They lose their bark." So since that time, thank you for laughing. You're healing my childhood. So ever since then, I've been collecting Jewish mother jokes. And one that I really love is about this young man who becomes very wealthy. He's traveling around the world, and he loves his mother. He wants to get her something extraordinary. He's in a marketplace in South America. He sees this mynah bird that speaks 12 languages. He pays $1,500. This is a long time ago when that was a lot of money. He spends $1,500 to buy the bird and have it shipped to his mother's apartment in New York. He comes back to the States a couple of weeks later. He's so excited. He says, calls her on the phone. He says, "Well, Ma, how'd you like the gift?" She says, "It was delicious." He can't believe it. He says, "Mom, don't tell me you ate that bird. The bird spoke 12 languages." She said, "He should have said something." So you're healing my childhood. Thank you very much. So finally, and I think maybe this is one of the most important aspects of humor, is it reminds us of joy. That's part of what will be, that's why Trudy is joining me in this workshop later, Play Shop, because we're really going to be talking about joy. Joy is the result of all of that. It's that glow, that feeling that we want from everything in our lives. And having humor reminds us of that quality. It reminds us of that. There's that famous story about the old monk whose job it is to translate all of the ancient scrolls. And he's down there in the catacombs, and these other monks hear a scream, and they come running down, and the old monk is shaking, and he's saying, "It says celebrate, not celibate." Damn it, I missed. So and what I love about the idea of celebration is that we can celebrate our differences in a playful way, in a loving way. When humor is delivered with love, the intention is what people receive. So I've always liked the description of heaven and hell as it would apply to the countries in Europe. In heaven, the police are English, the mechanics are German, the cooks are French, the lovers are Italian, and the whole thing is run by the Swiss. In hell, police are German, the cooks are English, mechanics are French, the lovers are Swiss, and it's all run by the Italians. It's just totally So part of the field that I want to create is to really allow humor to happen. Because when you begin to notice things, all of a sudden things start to be funny. You'll see things that you haven't seen before. And all of a sudden jokes will just start showing up. And I do this because I've been doing this since I was a kid. Trudy and I, when we lived in Texas, we went to our favorite Chinese restaurant, which we love, but this one time, Trudy bites down, and there's a piece of steel wool in the stir fry. And they might have been cleaning the wok and all that. And so, we called the waiter over, and they were so embarrassed, they gave us our meals for free. So now I always carry steel wool. Never know. But it was really uncomfortable because they took pride in their food. They were very embarrassed. And finally, at the end of the meal, they come, no check, of course, but they bring the fortune cookies. I called the waiter over, and he's going, "Oh my God, now what?" I said, "Excuse me, there's a piece of paper in my cookie." See, part of humor is finding unusual relationships between ordinary things. That's what we'll be learning and playing with later. Finally, something that happened to me, I was doing a program down in Walnut Creek for an HMO that shall remain nameless. And they had something called the Physician Wellness Program, which what an oxymoron that was. These are very unwell physicians. They were all stressed out. And I'm looking at this group, and I would say that 70 or 80% of them were from third world countries, So I'm doing the Swami, it's working okay. But the universe had a better idea. I'm in the middle of my presentation. All of a sudden, I'm interrupted by the PA, and over the PA we hear,
"Your attention, please. Your attention, please. Will the owner of a White Explorer, license number BK3450, please move your vehicle, you're blocking traffic."
Well, the Swami looks at the PA, looks at all of these third world people. He says, "I've always believed that most of the problems in this world have been caused by white explorers." I take no credit for that. Obviously God went, here's a watermelon for you to hit over the fence. But that's the power of humor. It really is something that provides surprise, it provides delight, it provides magic. And I hope you'll join us for Wake Up Laughing and Leave Laughter in Your Wake. Thank you much, and may the farce be with you. Thank you. Thank you.
Love. Serve